Hey guys, it's Kelly. Hey, I got another art journal page done in my mini art journal, and I thought I would share with you guys. Called it The Smallest Things Warm the Heart. And I'm loving the collection still. I went back to the Vicky Pepineu's Welcome Home series at Stamperia. And I've been dying to find the right way to play with the cups and the book that's spread open. So I found a composition that I really liked. And a lot of it is inspired by some of the pages that Vicky has done herself. So I always want to give credit where credit is due. And then I was thinking, to say something from my coffee stamp set along with my tea set. That might work out well. I already had the sentiment cut out. I didn't make the cut. But I did a lot of fussy cutting off camera, and I used some of the ephemera. And I used distress ink to distress it all. And again, just fussy cut everything. I fussy cut the sentiment and then some of the ephemera pieces too. And then I'm using my vintage photo just to very, very lightly go over the embossed folder. That's a really old embossing folder that I have, but it is one of my favorites. Just a really pretty, delicate swirl that is universal. You could do it for birthdays. I get so much use out of this. But yeah, so I'm just using my distress ink just to distress the outside of it and bring your eye in a little bit. And that works well for me. I didn't want to overdo it too much. And again, I just put the ink on the foam and lightly brushed it over the high points after it was embossed. And brought that background to life. And it was that simple. I didn't need to do much else to it. And then just messing with my composition here. I love that book, and I love just putting the cups right on top of it. And I thought that sentiment would work, but it wound up just not working. It was too busy, too crowded. So I chose a different sentiment. Probably could have made it work, but I think if it was a little bit bigger, it might have worked. So I went to my Pink Fresh stamp set. I lean on this a lot lately. It's got something for everybody and every occasion, especially for art journaling and stuff. So I really enjoyed that. So I wound up just changing my sentiment for it. And you could put whatever you want on there, but I found what works. So the first paper I was going to do was really, really flimsy. I think it was 90 pound. It might have been even like some old copy paper. I don't remember. But it definitely wasn't thick enough because I wanted my sentiment to have some beef to it. So I wound up just stamping it with my block and the VersaFine ink. And I believe I embossed it as well. So it was another example, like I did another video recently to where I almost forgot to emboss the darn thing. I started doing other stuff and I was like, oh shoot, I wanted to emboss it. So I wound up saving it just in time. So I didn't even have it out yet. And I was like, I want to emboss it. I want to emboss it. And I barely made it in time. You only got a small window of time while that ink is wet. So I just scooped it in, all of it, super fast. And I think I saved it. And there were some parts that didn't hold on to it very well and emboss that great. But again, it's my art journal. So I just went with what happened. So there it is. And then I also wanted to show you guys, I have shown you this before in old videos, but I've done so many videos over the years that I've been on YouTube that, good Lord, y'all don't see every single one. So there is some repeat in my videos, and I do that for a reason, just because, again, and not everybody sees all my previous videos. And those are the things that I think are really, really helpful that we might not think about. So in this one, it's my cutter. So before we get there, I melt the embossing powder, and I showed you this in the last video to where I start it from the back because I was worried about the powder hanging onto the ink. It wasn't wet enough. It was barely wet enough. So the pressure of the wind from the heat tool might actually blow some of it away. But if you start melting it behind, it will grab a hold, if that makes sense. So yeah, if you start to melt it there and then finish melting it from the front, it works out really well. So saved it. Boom. Okay, then with my cutter, with every cutter they've got a guideline, and I actually take mine off here to show you in detail. For a long time, my sentiments were not perfectly straight, and I didn't get it until I finally figured this out. So this guideline that's on the Tim Holtz guillotine cutter has two guides. There's one that's basically a 1/4 inch, and then there's one that's basically about a 1/2 inch. And you just line up the text that you have on whichever one you want. And it can be as, you can have like a 1/4 inch border like that, or you could just do like the 1/8 inch border if you bring it all the way to the end of the guide. So that guide is there for a purpose, not just to hold the paper in place, but it's also to help you cut straight. So, and then the grid lines on this are amazing. I love this guillotine printer or cutter. I've always loved it. So this one, I'm showing you basically that when you line it up, I had to put it back on there. When you line it up, you can get it a straight cut every single time. So even if you start with a completely backwards, crooked, sideways, diagonal type of piece of paper, as long as you get your first cut right, then that will be your guide for all the other cuts. So once you cut the first one, then you're going to use that line to line it up on your grid lines on the cutter, and then line it up with the guide on the plastic piece or acrylic piece that holds it down. So super, super cool, helpful thing, because sometimes I was cutting it by hand and it would get crooked, but this will get you a straight cut every single time if you're doing straight lines. So really, really like this thing. And again, I wish somebody had showed it to me a long time ago. So it's going to be straight every time. There you go. Boom. I love that. All right, so that is extremely white. Doesn't really go with my project, so I'm going to get that inked up here in just a second. But the size of that works a little bit better for the design, I think. The other one, it might have worked, but it just felt like it took too much of the show. I wanted the sentiment to be the accent, not the star of the show. It's not like a card where sometimes that sentiment is the star of the show, but this is an art journal. I want the star of the show to be the cups. And yeah, so hopefully it works out. So yeah, and then I'm looking at it like, gosh, there's something missing. And I decided to use something that I learned from Vicky, where you put a slit in your cup and you slide something in there. And I love that. I've done that with other things. This I want to give kudos to Vicky, because I totally copied something that she had done to put things in the top of the cup. And I love that. I love that. That was exactly what I needed on this one. So I did do some more fussy cutting and ephemera searching off camera for the leaves. The leaves, I think I cut those right out. There's some leaves in the ephemera pack, and then there's some that you can fussy cut out too from the collectibles. There's a lot of value in those collectibles that you get from Stamperia. I highly recommend those. There's a lot of fussy cutting that you will do, but there's so much value in that, and it's never ending. I've used a lot of it. I love that book on the table. I just love that. And I love that these are front and back, so I could flip it around. I could use if I don't like the orientation on the left side of the paper, I just flip that sucker over and put it on the right side. And I love having the freedom to do that. And I've used that often in some of the projects that I've done using these kind of papers from Stamperia, where they do that, where it's the same image on the front and back. I think that's a really cool design element that is overlooked by a lot of other paper, distributors, companies, I don't know. So yeah, Distress ink, my friend. It's always my friend. And I always find myself gravitating back to the original Distress ink. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I love all the other inks, but I always wind up going back here. So just laying all my stuff down. This was a fun one. I loved using the teacup stacking thing. Is so a Vicky thing, and I love it. I love it. I think that is her. For me, it's like a staple for her designs. And once I got I'm showing you my cell phone. Once I got a design that I liked, I take a picture of it so I don't forget where I liked everything at, because I will. Because, you fuss with things and you put it here, you put it there, and then you forget where you had it, where you're like, oh my God, that's it. That is the magic right there. And then you forget when you're actually building it, gluing everything down. So there it is. I hope you guys like this. It's kind of a fun one. It's not a new thing. It's new to me, but I haven't done a design like this before, and I really, really like it. I have so many cool embossing folders, and I forgot that I had all these really cool embossing folders. I have some from Tim Holtz. I have some 3D ones, really, really cool ones that I don't use half as much as I should. So even in my card making too, I could get a lot of use out of those. So I decided to, I built up the back of my sentiment with just regular cardstock pieces that I had around. I've got some phone tape, but I have all these extra little pieces of small white paper. Why not put that to use? So I used that for the sentiment, and I used it for the little butterfly. I wanted it to have a little bit of dimension, and I wanted it to look like it was kind of sitting on that one flower. And then the sentiment needed to be a little bit higher on one side because I had laid out some more between the embossing and the extra flower that I added to the cup. It needed to have a little bit more paper added to the back just on the one area that hits the base so that it's level. Otherwise it looks kind of bumpy. It's more of a card trick to do, but I mean, why not? It's literally one little piece of paper just to even it out. So there it is. I needed it to kind of overshadow the cups, or I don't know, overlay on top of the cups a little bit, and I was perfectly fine with that. It's no big deal. I think that's what it needed. It needs to have it all come together like it was supposed to be together. And then just adding my little tiny itty bitty little leaf part that I had. It's a teeny tiny little thing. And then that one little flower started, because there's dimension there, it wasn't sticking to the bottom part. And some of the ephemera in this pack does have a glossy finish. If it has a glossy finish, sometimes you're going to get some sliding. And but it's still cool. It's a great, it's still good to have, but the glue doesn't stick like you want it to sometimes. So just something to keep in mind. And I had to add just a couple little tiny pieces of paper just to give it something that's just to be able to adhere to the page behind it. So I really like how this design turned out. I hope you guys do too. I kind of gravitate to putting my focal points on the left top corner of the grid that you would draw out on your grid if you're artistic. I don't know. You make kind of like a the tic-tac-toe grid line on your paper, and then you choose like the corners where they connect for your focal points. I don't know. It seems to be aesthetically pleasing. I'm learning as I go. So my Wink of Stella pen, I'm just going to sparkle up my butterflies here and there. And then that's going to be it, other than some splatters. So in hindsight, I wish I would have done a little bit of white splatters too, and less of the dark black paint splatter. I think like the Distress ink, sorry guys, splatters would have been more subtle with white paint. In hindsight, that would have gone a little bit better. But I went and I did what I did. So I wanted to have a frame in the back in my book, and I wanted it to be blue just to kind of highlight some of the colors of the paper. So I just found some blue in my stash and went with it. Just glued it down. Kind of has a card vibe to it, doesn't it? Because I'm matting it. It's kind of like a card. I did make some cards this weekend. That was fun. I had a birthday card. It's a design. I'm going to upload that video here shortly too. And it's a super easy design, but it's just kind of like a real simple card. But it'd be really easy to make several of them with the design paper you already have. So hopefully somebody will gain something from that video too. So I'm just using my Belly Art glue like I love that glue. Slapping that sucker down on its mat in its permanent home. And then I'm thinking I still want some splatter marks. It would have been great just to leave it like that too. It just looks so nice just the way that it is. But It's the splatter thing. It usually helps bring things together, but in this case, in hindsight, I kind of wish either I wouldn't have done it at all, or I just would have barely done it in very light, like black, which would be the distress ink. When I splatter that winds up having a really good effect. And instead I went with the dark black acrylic paint, which in some designs that works really, really well. It's not that it messed it all up, but I don't know. Afterwards, it just seemed like it was overkill to me. I'm just covering the things that I don't want to have splatter marks on. Adding some more water so it's not so thick. Testing it, and then I went for it. Just little ones all over the place. Works fine. And I have a silicone transparent matte on my work surface there. It's working out pretty well for me. I just bought it on Amazon. And I kind of like it, so I can still see the grid lines behind it, but then I can also see, like when I put black paper down, I can see it better. Because usually I have a hard time lining up the black paper matte when I'm making cards, but that helps me have a little bit of contrast. So now I'm going to dry that and call it done. And put it in my book. Now I put it in its permanent home. And it totally looks like a card because that's exactly how the paper is laid out in my book. So funny. But there you can see the sparkles because I have the light above me on. If I don't have that yellow light above me, you can't even see the sparkles when I add them on there. So there it is. I like that. I hope you guys like it too. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, comment, and share. It definitely helps with my channel. And I will have a lot more to come. Thanks, guys.